Robert Schaefer, a pioneer in the field of college student personnel and services, once said, "We must view young people not as empty bottles to be filled, but rather as candles to be lit." You know, Schaefer's statement is filled with so much truth, isn't it? Young people are not just an empty bottle in which we store away some precious resource. They, by virtue of their youth, are a precious resource. In our program today, we're going to be exploring youthful potential and how that it's all around us. You know, young people have so much to offer, not only to society, but also to the church. So stay with us and we'll be back in just a moment.
How do you explain? How do you describe?
In Him, all families are blessed. Join our discussion on Fabric of Family.
You know, we've all heard the statement that young people are the leaders of tomorrow. And perhaps that's true in a sense. However, the Bible teaches that Christian teens are not just leaders in waiting, but rather they're actually equal members in the kingdom of God today. And their talents and abilities, they don't need to be put aside for some future day. They actually need to be used in today's generation. In fact, the Scriptures are full of examples of young people who use what they had, whether it be talents, possessions, or some other resource, and accomplish many great things for the Lord. In fact, we have a number of young people who are going to be on our program today, who are going to be helping us to discuss our topic of exploring youthful potential. So let's go over to Wes Ayers, who's at Mars Hill Bible School today in Florence, Alabama, for this week's segment of Word on the Street.
Oftentimes we're talking about the examples that young people set, and we're looking at the leadership roles that they have. A lot of times the young people in the congregation are referred to as the future of the church. What are some things that you think are leadership roles that yourself as a young woman or potentially some young men are serving as leadership roles right now in the church?
Right now we have opportunities in our school and in the community around us, such as TIA ministries and the ambassadors of Mars Hill that go to different churches and evangelize in their own way and show that they're practicing their leadership in the church today. And also there are boys in this grade that are more of a comfort zone and preaching in pulpits and lead singing.
Okay, one thing I think that we can be a leader at doing is being like a teacher at church. And where I go to church, I teach the 4th grade.
I feel that the youth can be really involved in the Lord's church. I personally do. I speak, sing, scripture reading, I pray, I've served on the Lord's table. I've really done just about everything there is to do at church. And I think that when older people see younger people stepping up and taking those roles seriously and performing them, it's really an encouragement to them as well as all the other youth.
Well, where I go to church, we have, every Wednesday night, we have a couple of young boys leading the singing and doing the scripture reading and sometimes doing the devotionals, and I think that's a way that they can step up and be leaders.
So what about when young men and young ladies take on those leadership roles? Do you think they're taken seriously?
I think so, because as an adult looking and seeing how a young person has the courage to step up and speak, that they have the courage that can step up and speak too.
Yes, I think so.
Older people ask me to do it, so yeah, I guess.
Well, thank you for joining our panel discussion for our program today as we're going to talk about exploring youthful potential. And as you can see from this fine group of young people I have gathered around me here on this couch, we're going to have some interesting discussion that's going to come not just from the perspective of some adult, but we're going to be able to see and hear what some of these young people actually think and believe about some of the questions that we're going to raise today. But I want to initially just give them the opportunity to kind of pass the microphone around and introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about them.
I'm Austin Sweeney. I'm a senior at Marcel Bible School. I attend Jacksonburg Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama. I play soccer. I'm the class vice president, involved in several things at school.
Great. Glad to have you with us, Austin.
I'm Thomas Sweeney. I'm also a senior at Marcel, and we're not brothers.
Okay.
I play basketball at school, and I'm in the band and student council, and I attend Florence Boulevard Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama.
It's good to have you with us.
I'm Hannah, and I'm also a senior at Mars Hill Bible School, and I go to Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, and I'm involved in the Mars Hill show choir and in theater there.
And what's your last name, Hannah?
Gilreath.
This is my daughter, Hannah Gilreath. Glad to have her.
I'm Addie Harrison. I also go to Mars Hill Bible School, and I'm a senior. I go to Wood Avenue Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, and I play basketball and softball.
Well, I know the congregations that you young folks represent are very proud of you and your participation in the program today. And I'm very thankful that you're here with us because we're talking about the subject of exploring youthful potential. I want you to think about just for a moment some examples in the Bible of young folks who had a lot of potential, a lot of ability, or maybe they didn't have a lot of ability in a lot of areas, but maybe there was some area that they had some potential in, talent, that they were willing to offer or share or use on behalf of God in His service. And I'm just curious, what are some of the examples that come to mind?
When I think about young people in the Bible, my mind automatically goes to Timothy. Paul writes to him and addressing he's a young preacher at the time, and he gets discouraged, and Paul tells him, don't let anybody put you down because you're young, but set an example. And I think that's something that's very important for us to do, is mainly set an example and be leaders. And that's Timothy's a great example of that.
Now you mentioned that Timothy could have gotten discouraged, you know, and of course Paul said, let no man despise thy youth. But certainly discouragement is something that can come our way as young people, as teenagers, because of maybe someone looks at you and says, well, you know, he or she is just a young person. You know, they can't contribute, they can't offer much to us or what we're trying to accomplish. What would you say to someone who might maybe have that as their perspective of youth?
Florence Boulevard, usually every Wednesday night, a different young man leads the singing. And at our church, they've just come to expect that we do a good job. And so there's not much discouragement there. Every time we lead, everybody always comes down afterwards and tells us that we did a good job, or somebody speaks us the same way. And so they've come to expect that from us, and so our church family is very encouraging.
To add to that, a lot of people who think that don't really think people who are like teenagers and younger are really mature in their spiritual life. And when reality, some of those teenagers are just as mature as the older people, and it's just kind of a mindset you have to work on.
Okay.
Well, I think that we have to practice, like, as young people, that if we're ever going to be as spiritually mature as older people, it's got to come one day. It's not like we turn however old or age and we're automatically spiritually mature. We have to practice and work on that, and it has to start now, and that's the only way that we'll be just as spiritually mature as them, if not more.
And I like your word, practice, because there's really a lot of wisdom in that, because maturity is a process, isn't it? It's not like we just wake up one day and you know, bang, we're mature. There's a growing process, isn't there, that's involved through this process of maturing. If someone were to ask you, well, what role can young people have in the kingdom of God today? I'm just kind of curious, what are your thoughts concerning that question?
Well, like, young men can lead singing, and then they can preach, you pray, and then the women can teach Bible class and just be involved in that stuff.
Okay, so does our age then limit us in serving in the local church?
I know from experience, I've preached on several occasions, and members afterward usually come up and thank me for setting that example. And it's not anything that I've done really, or anything that I've said, just really that I've put myself out there and set that example for them, and it kind of lifts them up and encourages them to see young people trying to be the best that they can be in the Lord's church.
When I was younger, still single digits, 8 or 9, I know I always looked up to the teenage guys and tried to do what they do, and like the basketball players, I wanted to be just like them. So I think as teenagers, not only can we lead in the services, but as Austin said, our example, especially to the people younger than us, is a huge part of what we do.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point to make. And, you know, the young people maybe who are watching the program even today at home to remember that regardless of how old you are, there's someone who's younger than you and someone who may very well be looking at you as an example. They may never say it to you, and they may see you on a regular basis, but you do have an influence, do you not? What are some ways that churches can exploit, and we use that in a good sense, but exploit the potential that young people have in the church and to use that talent and that ability?
Just by letting them get up there and show that they are capable of leading, singing, and preaching and praying.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just say give them opportunities to do that. Like at our church, we have like a coordinator of the teachers and stuff, and every quarter we have like the opportunity. They'll come to our class and say, does any of the teenagers want to teach? And they'll tell us the grades and ages of the kids. And I know from experience that that's really encouraging to me, because I see how hard it is for my parents or other people's parents who taught me when I was a kid or teenagers. And it requires a lot of effort to put together a Bible class and a lesson, and it's just encouraging. And I think that the parents look up to us whenever we set an example like that.
I'm just kind of curious, what are some things that you personally have done within the confines of the congregation that you attend, or maybe another one that you attended in the past, that is an example of leadership, a way in which you have been involved, you have been active in the local church?
I've spoken as well as leading, singing, and serving the Lord's table, but the best thing that helped me is the Last Leaders program at our church, and that taught me how to speak and to get up in front of people and lead singing, and going through that and the training that it gave me.
Okay, so having opportunities then to get up before people and to, you said you've spoken, by that you mean you've delivered lessons, sermons,
yes, sir.
Leading, singing. Okay, all right, what's some others?
I've done several things. I've spoke on several occasions at several different churches, and but I think one of the biggest things for me is presiding over the Lord's table, because you're directing everyone's mind and getting everybody focused on really what you're there to do, and that's remember Christ and His sacrifice for us. And I find that to be one of the biggest responsibilities on somebody leading in worship.
You know, I find it very interesting that you say that, because I think that's a very wise and mature answer that you've given. I think sometimes maybe not enough emphasis is placed upon the Lord's Supper and those who lead in that. And so that's certainly an important area of service that young people like yourself, Austin, can be involved in. What about some of you young ladies? What are some ways in which you have been involved in serving the local church, serving Christ?
Well, I usually help out with the nursery sometimes. And then recently, the youth group has been going to a retirement home, and we go and we help with the service there. And the girls will go and just, help support and sing.
All right.
Yeah, I think that like encouraging the men and the boys our age, kind of that could help them know that, hey, somebody actually it's appreciated, and they see how hard it is to get up there and to lead. And I think it's very intimidating to talk to people older than you. I've done a speech or whatever for Lads Leaders, but I did it for our women's class. And I was like I was nervous to do it before because I'm thinking, man, these women have heard so many talks in their life because these are like older people and they've been in the church a long time. And then like after I was done, they were all like very encouraging and told me what a great job I did and just how a different perspective can help them too.
Well, I tell you what, those older folks that you mentioned, no doubt, were an encouragement to you. But you young folks are an encouragement to me, and also I think those who are viewing the program today. We'll be back in just a moment.
We've all heard the statement, young people are the leaders of tomorrow. But I'd like to venture out to say that young people are the leaders of today. I'd like to explore a story, a very familiar story to us in the book of John chapter 6, beginning in verse 1. This is Jesus feeding the 5,000, one of his most famous miracles of his ministry. I'd like to begin reading in verse 5 and then draw some applications from it. Then Jesus lifted up his eyes, and seeing a great multitude coming toward him, he said to Philip, "Where shall we buy bread that these may eat?" But this he said to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may have a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon's Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 small fish. But what are they among so many?" Then Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000. And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down, and likewise of the fish as much as they wanted. So when they were filled, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the fragments that remain, so that nothing is lost." I'd like to draw 3 applications from this story. The first application I'd like to draw comes to us in verse number 9. It says, "There is a lad here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they among so many?" This is Andrew speaking, talking about the young lad that offered his lunch. I think sometimes that young people are often viewed as this verse says, what are they among so many? I think sometimes that young people are looked down upon because we are young and because we don't have a lot of experience that older members of the church have. But what are they among so many? Then Jesus said, "Make the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the men sat down in number about 5,000. The second application I'd like to draw comes to us from verse 11. "And Jesus took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to the disciples, and the disciples to those sitting down." The young lad, he didn't have much to give. He had 5 loaves and 2 fish. And Andrew doubted him and said, what is that among so many? But Jesus knew what he would do. He knew that he would multiply and he would make enough for each person to eat as much as they wanted. I think that young people sometimes, we tend to doubt our talents and we tend to doubt our abilities in the kingdom of God. And we say, I'm just a one-talented person. I don't have anything to give. What is my talent among so many? But if you give it to Jesus Christ, if you say, "God, I'm going to give you my life, I'm going to give you my talents, and I'm going to do my best to use my talents in your kingdom," Jesus will multiply our talents as much as we need. If we just surrender our life and we say, "I'm going to use my talents for you, and I'm going to work in your kingdom," Jesus will multiply our talents, and he will do great things, and he will use us for good in his kingdom. The third application I'd like to draw comes to us in verse 12. "So when they were filled, he said to his disciples, 'Gather up the fragments that remain, so that nothing is lost.'" Going back to verse 11, if we just give our life to God and we fulfill our potential and we give our life to God, he will multiply our talents. Not only will he multiply our talents, he will use us up in his kingdom. There will be nothing left. When God is done with us, there will be nothing left. If we give our life to God, we will always do what's right, and he will always do what's best in his kingdom. Exploring youthful potential. I'm convinced that young people are looked down upon sometimes. What are we among so many? Out of all the people of the church that could fulfill a particular duty, what is it for a young person to do it? If we give our life to God and we say, God, I'm going to use my talents for you, He will multiply and He will use us for good in His kingdom. Gather up the fragments that remain, Jesus said, so that nothing is lost. Jesus will use us to our fullest potential, and we can fulfill our potential in God if we will only say, God, I give my talents to you.
We're back for our second and final part of this segment of our panel discussion, and we have a fine group of young folks that are assembled here for this today, and appreciate them being with us. We're going to get back into our discussion that we were having just a moment ago. I want us to think for just a moment why it is, in your opinion, that sometimes adults may look down upon young people and think that they're not able to step forward and do things when there are needs that arise within the church.
I think it goes back to their mindset on things. Sometimes they get discouraged when young people, they may see them acting a certain way, and they may have seen their failures in the past, and they want to hold on to those things, and they can't move forward in life and see that young people can change and young people can be different. And sometimes they don't want to give them a second chance. And I think that's a lot of times when people are a little reluctant to let young people help.
Okay, any others have any thoughts on that?
Like Austin said, there's a lot of bad stuff going on with teenagers today, and sometimes older people put that on all of us, what some are doing, instead of we're not like everybody else, you know. And
yeah, and so you know, older folks, we need to look at young folks and evaluate them as an individual and not just put everybody in the same boat or the same category, so to speak. You know, over in the book of 1 Timothy chapter 4 and verse 12, the Apostle Paul wrote to young Timothy, and he said, "Let no man despise thy youth." And personally, I find that interesting because he's saying, Timothy, don't you let an older person despise you because you're young. I'm kind of curious, what can we do, or what can young folks do in order to keep older folks from looking down upon them, despising them?
I think whenever we take responsibility of the little things in life, like just simple things, then they'll be more able to trust us with the bigger things like our spiritual life. I think that's maybe why they want to help out a lot and want to tell us exactly how we're supposed to do things, because if we can't handle small things like just everyday things, then how are they expecting us to handle big things?
That's a great point, because, you know, proving ourselves to others, we have to prove ourselves in the little things, don't we? And there's a principle in the Bible that basically says that very thing. If we can't be trusted with the little things in life, how are we going to be trusted with the larger things in life? Hannah?
We have to prove, and people might, you know, discourage us and be like, well, you know, you're young and you can't do it, but you have to just prove them wrong in a non-disrespectful way, and just show them who you can be and be the best.
Okay. Anybody else?
A lot of times the older people see us at church and look at us one way, but then when we go outside of church and maybe we see the same people, if we're acting in a different way, that gives them the impression, you know, that we're not that we ought to be. And so outside of church, if you do things the way you should and you're seen by people outside of the church, then they realize, you know, he's not just doing that as church, but that's the way he lives.
Okay, well, what can parents do then? Or what can congregations do to help young people develop their abilities that they already have, to develop their talents so that they can do greater and greater things in the Lord's kingdom in the years to come?
I think one of the biggest things they can do is offer us encouragement. Even sometimes we may mess up, we may fail, but that's part of life, it's part of growing, it's part of maturing. And encourage us and keep giving us chances, keep giving us opportunities. We're only going to grow, we're really going to get better. and encouragement and giving us second chances is a big part in that.
All right, someone else?
Somebody told me one time, go up to older people and ask them 3 lessons they've learned from life. And so going up to older men in my congregation and asking them these things, it's amazing what one small question, how great conversations and long conversations you can sit and have and learn from these people. And so one of the best thing I would say is for older people, sometimes you may not think teenagers want to talk to you, but they do, and they want to learn from you. So pass on what you've learned and be a mentor to the younger people.
What great advice for those of us who are older to be willing to do that. And it's also great advice for those who are younger to be willing to go and to listen to some of these older folks. You know, these older folks at church, they love talking to the younger generation. And they love sharing their stories. They love sharing the lessons that they've learned. And so there's a great resource there for young people who are watching this program, who may have members of their local congregation they can go to and talk to and learn these lessons that are so very, very important. We've just got about a minute left in this segment, and I want to see what your thoughts are concerning what advice you might give to a teenager who wants to be involved more. Maybe they've not been involved in the past in things. They want to do more. What advice would you give them to help them along that way?
Well, first, if you're struggling with something, try your best to get out of it. Put yourself around people that will help you. And then you need to just be more involved in the church, show people that you're changing and that you're a different person, and people will eventually see it, and they will grow more respect for you, and that your name will eventually change to something better.
Okay, well, great. I want to thank this group of young people for being with me today. I tell you what, they've done a great job, and I want to commend you for all of the activities you're involved with, but at the same time, you took time to be involved in this activity, which is also important, and I appreciate you being with us. Well, that's our program for today, and we hope that you have profited greatly by viewing Fabric of Family. You know, Fabric of Family is brought to you each week by the Jackson Heights Church of Christ in Florence, Alabama, a congregation that cares about the home and the members of your family that make the home up. We have some interesting programs that are going to be coming your way in the weeks and months to follow, so we hope that you'll be a regular viewer of Fabric of Family. We also hope that you will tell your friends and family about our TV program. And if you're ever in the Florence, Alabama area, why not join us for one of our worship assemblies? And so for the Jackson Heights Church of Christ and the production team that makes this broadcast possible, I'm Barry Gilreath, wishing you and your family a bright and wonderful week as you walk in the sunshine of His grace.